our Director of Customer Support.
Yeah, so this is Jason. I'll be talking with Dwayne today. We'll walk through some questions. And by the way, if you do have questions, I think there's our Q&A area. I think you can post questions there. Feel free, and you can start doing that now or throughout. And we'll get to those towards the end for sure. So answer any questions you have there. And with that, so I'm Jason Sherman. I've been with Graphical Networks, which is the company. Our product is netTerrain. Let me switch down. So that's Dwayne. He'll be talking in a minute and filling you in on his background. If you want to, Adriana, if you want to cover the agenda for today.
Yeah, sure. So today we're just going to do a quick overview of netTerrain. Again, if you do have any questions, you can throw them in the chat or the Q&A. We'll then jump into our discussion with Dwayne and go over his project, which is really cool to see. We'll go over your questions and answers towards the end. So please feel free to ask away, and then we'll wrap things up.
Thank you very much. So moving on. So again, Jason Sherman. I've been with Graphical Networks, the company, for a number of years, over 10 years now. We started back in 2007. netTerrain, our Graphical Networks did. The product netTerrain, started version 1.0 or whatever version number it was. So been around for a while. A lot of customers around the world. Domestic, international, etc. And I think a lot of the attendees are domestic and international as well. So that's great to see. Thank you guys for joining us for sure. So the software netTerrain, it's really purpose-built network documentation type software. Inside plant, outside plant. What does that mean? You can document as-built environment, how things are in your environment, all the way from a high level, buildings, floors, rooms, wiring closets, data centers, racks, etc. We sort of refer to that as inside plant, although technically it can encompass some outside things like fiber, but also outside plant, which is typically more traditional outside the building, manholes, handholds, pits, conduits, duct banks. Certainly fiber cables is the big thing that people care about there. Fiber cables and strands. So again, Graphical Networks been around since 2006, 7. So a while. Product's been around a long time too. So anyway, with that said, let me move on here. I'm going to let Dwayne take it away from here. Dwayne, if you could introduce yourself, a little bit of background, how long you've been at BWI. By the way, just so everybody knows, BWI, Baltimore, Washington International Airport, you guys see it on the screen there. It's basically a little bit south of Baltimore, if you want sort of an idea of where that's located. It's for me, myself, and some of the others here at Graphical Networks, because we're in Maryland, it's a primary airport for us. And if you like Southwest Air, it's a pretty major hub for them as well. So anyway, with that said, Dwayne, I'll let you take it away. And you are on mute right now, Dwayne, just so you know.
Okay.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Thanks for the invite, by the way.
Oh, thanks for coming.
We appreciate you being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, I've been with BWI for 18 years. 2 years of that, I was a contractor. I was brought in to basically document all the cable plant at BWI, surrounding buildings, and we also have another smaller airport. It's a commercial one, or I'm sorry, a private one. It's called Martin State, and we take care of that as well. When I was brought on, everything here was not documented. I would walk into a comm room, I'd see a rack, panel, fiber, and I had no idea where it went. There was no label. All I had was a room number. So as you can pretty much tell, I had an awful long time trying to find everything, document everything on paper, just to get an idea how the lay of the land and where everything went. It took me about, I'd say, almost a year to walk the whole airport and the buildings, trace everything, shoot everything with distances. And once I got that, I brought it back and gathered it and put it into an Excel sheet. Jason, I don't know how much you want me to talk about this, or
no, that's good. I'm going to ask you some questions, which is one, because you talked about sort of the Excel sheet and going out and sort of gathering the data and the information. You said it took a while to get all that information, and that was information you were gathering, I think, pre-netTerrain, if I'm not mistaken, because you guys had another tool before us, in fact. But also the stuff that you're really kind of in charge of is primarily like the fiber and the LIUs and the connectivity between that within the infrastructure. Is that right, Dwayne?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I take care of all the infrastructure. I do the copper as well, but we do not document all the connections for copper because it changes so much. You know, we have contractors that will go in there, change things without our knowledge. But the way we have it now, the fiber plant, I am the sole person who touches it. No one whatsoever is allowed to touch it.
Right. But if you have new fiber laid or changes need to be made, I assume you do the changes, or somebody else does the changes. They need to tell you what those changes are. Is that correct?
No. Well, almost. They put in a request for a connection via fiber. I will basically go to my database now, which is netTerrain, and within a heartbeat, I can tell whether or not it's available.
Right.
And once I find that, I do the connections as well.
Yeah. So before we get down into the netTerrain path, what was the tools, or what were you guys doing before netTerrain, and also what led you guys to sort of even following the path of doing any documentation for that matter?
Yeah, getting to the documentation, well, a little backstory. 9/11 came, the feds come in, they wanted connections, and our IT people tried to make connections for them, but with a little bit of embarrassment, they didn't know where everything went because, again, nothing was documented.
Right.
I'd say a couple of years after that, that's when I was brought in as a contractor to document everything. So when I was brought in, they had a tool called Alticam. It's an older cable software, but it took me probably 15 to 20 minutes to enter one circuit end to end. And it wasn't very efficient for me. I was spending more time at my desk rather than being out in the field doing other work. So I decided to use Excel, which was a little better for me. You know, I can basically visually see what it was end to end, but again, it wasn't very good. Yeah. That's why I went out and looked for other avenues and other software. And lo and behold, thank God I found you guys. It works.
Yeah, well, we're always happy to hear that. And just so everybody knows, also what was nice is obviously there's a location. You guys are relatively close to us because we're in Maryland as well. We're a Maryland company, which was, I think, part of your consideration. But before that, I want to comment, you know, Excel is pretty common, everybody out there, you know, as far as documentation. I'm sure a lot of folks on the call are using Excel today. That's, you know, usually we see folks move from Excel and then they'll move to a tool like ours or another tool that's out there. So that's pretty common, I think, using Excel. And I think it's a pretty good tool to a certain extent, but you sort of start to grow out of it, I guess. So you mentioned, you know, sort of finding us. What was that process like? Was it mainly just kind of Googling around for outside plant or fiber, or how did you kind of come upon us?
Basically Googling around. I looked for user-friendly software. Some are very cumbersome to use, which I liked what I saw, so that's why I reached out to you.
Gotcha. Which kind of leads into the question of, you know, why netTerrain? You know, why? So you started looking at us. Why did that become kind of the consideration, like our tool?
Right. Well, it's user-friendly, as I said, and the other software took 15 to 20 minutes to enter a circuit, where yours is less than a minute, less than 30 seconds. It's great. It's just click and go.
Right. Gotcha. And we'll talk about sort of using the tool a little bit. I might show a little something there as well, just so people are familiar, because they may have not actually seen the tool too much yet. So I'll probably share my screen and show a little of that. Maybe Dwayne, you can show a little of your project too, time permitting. How did you start? I mean, you obviously had a product before, you had Excel, and you mentioned it took a while to kind of go out there and do things. But if you could kind of talk about that again from the standpoint of, you're going to go start and do a project like network documentation. For you, what was that? What did that look like? You mentioned, going to room, but I'll let you talk a little bit more about that.
Sure, absolutely. I started working from the IDF towards the MDF. By doing that, I was able to get rid of a lot of the garbage along the way, like dead jumpers, jumpers that were just hanging, circuits that weren't used anymore. To be honest, I bet you I cleaned out over 500 jumpers or more, maybe close to 1,000. I didn't have an exact number, but just by doing that method, working from the IDF towards the MDF, I cleaned up a whole lot, and I documented it as I went. And I literally had to hand trace each patch cord. And when I did that, I also used the P-Touch label, labeled the panels, labeled the jumper. So everything and anything has a label and is documented here.
Gotcha. And you said time.
I'm sorry. As far as how long it took, what I'd say probably 3/4 of a year to maybe document or find everything. And then once I had the info, within 3 months, I had my database complete.
Gotcha. And what's the scale or size? I mean, it's an airport, so all airports are relatively big anymore, especially, international or statewide airports like BWI. But in the context of number of LIUs or IDFs or whatever you kind of want to frame it as, I'm just kind of curious what that looks like.
Yes, we have about 190 IDFs and 5 MDFs here.
Yeah.
That's counting the exterior buildings and that other airport as well, the smaller one.
Gotcha. And as far as collecting that data, you mentioned kind of toning things out. I assume that means you're going out with a fiber tool of some sort and tracing fiber. Is it alive, where it connects? This is from somebody that's not that familiar with having to do that type of work. So
sure, they really do. You can't tone fiber basically, so you have to use an OTDR. Gotcha. That way you get your distances and you have your map. And you kind of zero in where you're going.
Gotcha. Okay. Hence probably why it takes a while to kind of do all that stuff and get things sorted out. So any particular challenges outside of just the fact that it's time consuming and doing that type of thing?
It's challenging to get the information, but entering it, no, not at all. When I started to build the database, I started with the backbone. Once I plotted all the buildings and everything on my, page, I started to tie in all the backbones. Once I had that, then I tied in the IDFs and then added the individual circuits.
Yeah. Okay. As far as using a tool like netTerrain, because obviously, one, it can help, it sounds like, with, kind of cleaning things up documentation wise, but how has it helped? Has using netTerrain improved efficiency? That's one sort of the question we have on our board here. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. Efficiency, yeah, it's really efficient. I'm spending less time at my desk entering data and more out in the field doing, the odds and ends that is required of me. I just don't take care of the data or the cabling here. I also have to take care of other instruments, circuits, and whatnot. So, excuse me, I'm getting a little nervous here. I'm seeing the 93 count here.
I think this is our biggest turnout. You're doing great.
You're looking at fibers.
Yeah.
You're okay.
So No, that's great. So it's more efficient now, it sounds like, as far as finding, uh, we talked about this a bit before, which is like finding pathways and being able to determine like the things that really that started all this, right? Somebody came out and said, "Hey, we need to get out to the internet. We need a pathway, a circuit," and they couldn't really deliver. Not you per se, and this was a long time ago, of course. But now, obviously, that's something that sounds like you can do, and probably very quickly. It sounds like as well. So.
Yeah. As I said, yeah, I'm spending less time at the desk. If somebody requests a circuit, I go out, like I said, and I survey and connect it all, and I come back, and I'm telling you, less than 5 minutes, the circuit's put in the database. So once I have it all in there, you really spend a lot less time entering data.
Yeah.
It frees you up quite a bit. And when you have a trouble, it's a matter of just clicking on that link, and you can literally find end to end all the patches, all the splice cases, handholds, and whatnot. And you know right where it goes, end to end.
Gotcha. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about features later because we may talk and show some of that stuff in your project. And there's a question here about how netTerrain kind of helps you retaining fiber network knowledge at BWI, but I think you've sort of explained that, which is, I mean, anybody can come in now and look at really your project and see your fiber backbone, your fiber infrastructure, how things are connected, and really kind of get information about your, project as far as the fiber and how things are connected, which is great. Advice for airports and facilities, because I know we have a few of those on sort of paying attention today. And what should folks look for when they're looking at a solution like netTerrain? Because obviously, there's other solutions out there. It's always good to look at different ones, make sure it fits the bill as far as what you're trying to do. But for you, what kind of advice do you have, and what do you think people should look for?
Something that's going to be obviously user friendly. You want to be able to enter the data fast, because you can't be spending all your day and time at your desk. But I can't, because I'm a technician as well. I need to be out in the field too. So,
right.
But entering the data, I can't stress it enough. Having a unique numbering scheme is key, absolutely key. Here we have door numbers. Every door you enter or exit has a number on it. So I use that as a identifier for that comm room. And then I would go a row number with all the racks, a rack number, a panel number, and then a port. And that's our standard here. Nobody deviates from that. And once you have all that, you're good to go. You just take it away.
Gotcha. That's great. Well, thanks for that. we're going to look at your project, Dwayne, in just a second. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you guys see my project on the screen. This is sort of our traditional demo project. This is netTerrain. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to it in case you haven't seen it before. So a couple things. We do SaaS and cloud, but also you can host it yourself. I know for Dwayne, they host their own server, which a lot of customers do, which is great, and it's not hard to do by any stretch. Get it up and running and so forth. We're a hierarchical tool, so you can build out a hierarchy of information and data, which Dwayne will show you here in a second in his, I think. But for me, if I want to navigate down, and again, this is just a demo project, we kind of show everybody where I can navigate down into things like a university campus and show multiple buildings and show things like fiber pathways, conduits, fiber cables, and so on. I can jump down into a building. I can go into things and see things like floor plans, wiring closets, and so on. So there's a lot of detail you can put into a tool like ours. Do you have to put that in? No, certainly not. Most folks do not necessarily get down to like wall jacks and that kind of thing, or even necessarily wiring closets. It might be just about, I need to show equipment in a traditional kind of data center, or maybe I'm showing equipment that's not even in a building. I just need to show everything out on the street. manholes, handholds, and that type of thing. So pretty easy to do. So, you know, a lot of these things, these projects get back to, and a lot of questions I get when I'm doing demos and talking about netTerrain is, and kind of what Dwayne had mentioned, which is, you know, what's a good starting point? How long are things going to take? And, you know, level of effort type things. Well, level of effort is always dictated by, do you have data today? Is it good data, right? I mean, you might have data, but if nobody trusts it, it's not, you know, it's kind of useless, really. But in the case of Dwayne, he had to really kind of start from scratch and move out. And you can see a project like this can take a while. I mean, he alone was doing this and takes upwards of a year of gathering data and then putting it into a system. And it sounded like, you know, mainly went into Excel first, and then he sort of migrated it out into netTerrain. But, you know, it can take time depending on, again, the scale and scope and everything you do. I will say, fiber outside plant, that's really the hardest stuff to document, especially if it's not documented, right? Going and finding splice cases and having to document splices and LA's the whole thing. It's a lot of work. So, you know, just know what you're in for with network documentation. Also, don't take on too much. I talk to a lot of folks and they see a lot of features and functionality in a tool like ours, and you want to kind of tackle everything, and it's not going to work out. It's always good to kind of focus on that core thing that you really want to sort of tackle documentation wise. So with that said, Dwayne, if you have your project, if you're logged into that, I'd love to see a little bit if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I'll comment a little bit on his project because I have seen it. Oh yeah, this is great. So this is kind of the starting point. I'll let you talk a little bit about what we're seeing here so
Sure.
other folks know.
This is BWI Airport and surrounding buildings. The yellow is our single mode backbone, or I'm sorry, backbones and fiber ring. We have one that goes around the complete circle of the airport, and we have an internal ring at the terminal as well. So these blocks, this is just areas. Like I'll just click on this little building right here, and that's showing me all the buildings in that area, because obviously the map is a little tight to get everything into it. So I broke it out, you know, in little segments like that.
Yeah, and you can, it's something you can do. I see a lot of folks, they'll segment things out. Some people put a lot of stuff on the map, which is fine. It's just that things get much smaller and you have to zoom in and out more. So sometimes segmenting is a better way to go, like you have here, which is great. Just so everybody knows too, the map you see, that's an integration we have with OpenStreetMaps. You can also use Google Earth or, you know, Google Maps as well, so you can see like satellite views if you want to. This allows us to place objects on the map, but then you can see latitude and longitude and know sort of positioning of where things are. And you can position objects automatically with lat and long too. There's ways of doing that as well. So anyway, back to you.
Also, I'm showing my splice cases as well.
Yeah.
I'll go into the terminal now. This would be the lower level of the terminal. We have an upper level as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a great looking map. This is a background image, just so everybody knows. You could upload images in netTerrain as a background or as just a standalone image that you can kind of move around and resize. But a background would be, you know, traditional image types, PNGs and JPEGs. You're not drawing those things in our tool. We're not a drawing package, but you can use, like if you have AutoCAD and you have a floor plan or something and you want to take those and use those, you can certainly do that. You just have to export them out as a format that we would let you use, which again would be traditional things like PNGs and SVGs. So.
Okay. Now I'll just go into one of our farm rooms. These are the lineups of the racks. And let's see here. This is how I got it laid out.
Yep.
Now, I do connect to the switches. Let's see here. The reason I'm connecting here, typically I don't have to, but if I don't do that, my ports on the panel are not showing, if you know what I mean. So this is saying it's going to ports 1 and 2. So if I clicked on that, it would go right back to the panel where it is, showing row 2, rack 2, panel 1, and the first 12 port.
Gotcha.
And if you wanted to see the whole trace, if you don't mind, Jason, I'll just click on that.
Yeah, please. So what Dwayne's doing now is a feature in netTerrain where you can generate what we refer to as a CLR, circuit layout record. Basically, it gives you end-to-end path. So wherever you're starting from, it's going to show you that full spread. Okay, I'm here in the data center at a port. Where does it connect? And then where does that connect? And where does that connect? And so on and so forth. So this shows you the path end to end of where you're starting and where you're ending.
Yeah, it's a great troubleshooting tool because that way you don't have to go out and physically walk to every comm room. You know, does it go there? Does it not go there? I can tell exactly what building it goes to, what IDF, MDF, and where it's and how it's connected at each end.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's great. And this shows hierarchy versus physical path. So it actually shows you the location of where the object is. In this case, all the ports, port, card, chassis, rack, room, etc., all the way up to the building floor, whatever your highest level part is, and then the physical sort of path end to end. So Dwayne, thank you for that, for showing that.
I just wanted to show you one thing.
Please.
When I was collecting my data, I used the OTDR and I created a calculator so I can give the distances. I can click on any one, it'll give me the distance from one IDF to the other. So when people request circuits, I can let them know how long it is.
Gotcha.
I know it's not your stuff. I'm just throwing it out what I just.
No, that's good. No, it's part of this is that so obviously people can see what other folks have done. Obviously, it's in our context of our tool, but they can use that kind of really anywhere, and then might be a valuable resource for some of these folks that want a project to get started. So I am going to start answering questions now. If you guys bear with me for a second, I'm gonna go to the top here. Just so you guys know, in the chat, we did, there is a case study, also BWI case study. Again, we'll repost this webinar for you guys soon. So John was asking about conduits. I don't think you do conduits, Dwayne, right? Are we mainly fiber? But I'll let you comment because I don't know.
I don't use conduits in my documentation, but yes, you can.
Yeah.
That gets really, really involved. Keep in mind, though, when you're documenting or trying to find everything, you don't know where a conduit goes. You truly don't. I mean, these are just, these are logical paths. They're not physical. Our ring is physical, though. That's pretty close to the way it is right there. But these other backbones, they are going through conduit systems, but again, it's not the direct path which it would actually be.
Yep, makes sense. In netTerrain, just so you guys know, because there were a few questions around this, I'm going to reshare my screen here. Let me go to this guy here. I think you should see my building pop up on the screen. So in my case, I do show conduits. Conduit is just really a link for us that you can run between objects. Conduits can have relationships. Any link can have a relationship to another link type, just so you guys know. We call it bundling. So you get into this ability to create things like you might have a trench and then conduits and then fiber inside that and have a relationship between all those things. It kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning, which is there's a lot of features and functionality in tools like ours. It's, use the ones that make the most sense for what your project is, right? So a lot of folks are like, they don't really need to do conduit. They're just, hey, I just need fiber and strands. That's what I care about. I have others that absolutely track conduit, so you can do that. Some other questions. Dennis had mentioned about FAA coming in and doing the survey. It sounds like that was all you, Dwayne, doing your surveys.
FAA didn't do the survey. They just want connection.
They just wanted the connections. I gotcha.
Right. Somebody asked about what the yellow lines were, if they were fiber strands. Yes, each line could be a bundle of 144, 288, 96, or 48.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And just to clarify too, when you have a cable in netTerrain, like a fiber cable specifically, you're going to see the cable, but then there's an interface to actually see all the strands. So that's what this shows. This is a 12 strand. It shows you the 12 strands, shows you the tube color, the fiber color, and then you can see if it's got a connection and where does that fiber connect strand one and what it connects to on each end, right? So are the connections still managed in Excel and then in netTerrain? No, everything's done in netTerrain once you're moving from Excel over. So I hope that makes sense. Excel can be used to import data into netTerrain. Like if you're mass importing data, you can do an import, or you can do things manually. I think, Dwayne, that's really what you did, was just kind of bring things in sort of one at a time, and just completed it over time. So yeah, we saw some of the BWI project. I'm just scrolling down through the list here, guys. Let's see, what brand, model, optical time domain reflector did you use for your project? I guess that's the OTDR. Dwayne, he was just asking about models and brands. Is there a specific one you guys use?
No, there's no specific. Actually, what is that? I don't know.
Yeah, no worries. Well, but I'll speak to models and manufacturers and all that stuff. So in our catalog of devices, there's probably about 20,000 devices and cards in our catalog when we ship now. So there's quite a few things and brands. There's probably 650 or more manufacturers in our catalog. The nice thing about our catalog is it's really kind of open from the standpoint of, you don't need us to create something for you. You can go in and create your own device types in netTerrain. You know, you need an icon or an image. You can take a picture or upload something from the internet. We do support where, if you're a customer, you can request things from us. So if something's missing from the catalog, or you got something new, it's not there, and you're like, hey, I don't want to create it, we will do that for you as well. That's not an extra charge. That's just if you're under maintenance kind of thing. So just so you guys know. There's a question around using the geo coordinates for plotting handholds and splice boxes. Did you do any of that, Dwayne? Were you kind of placing things based on lat and long, or you just kind of place them based on you kind of know where things are?
No, actually, a lot of them are GPS coordinates.
Gotcha. Okay.
We did a whole survey of that, and
gotcha.
All the manholes were done that way.
All right. There is a feature where you can right-click an object with geo coordinates and do place, put in the lat and long, click OK, and it will position it. You can also do a search on map. So if there's like a building you're looking for, kind of thing. We can place things lat and long using Excel import. So if you're bulk importing data, if you have an integration with an outside tool, something like ServiceNow or Remedy, something that has data in it, you can position things to X, Y, lat and long, et cetera. It just depends on, in those cases, the data and what you're trying to do, and so on and so forth. So does the software allow you to add multiple cross connect areas for the path, data center from the MMR carrier connection to tenant? If I understand this correctly, I would say yes, but if you wanted more detailed answer, you should reach out to us and we can kind of talk to you a little more detail about that. I mean, you can do cross connects, you can do the splicing, you can kind of do most everything, but you know, I may be misunderstanding the question a little bit too. So question around SaaS. Remember I mentioned we have SaaS cloud and on-prem. SaaS is kind of our hosting environment where you can go up netTerrain US and set up an instance and do testing right away, and you know, pay through a credit card right there. We do cloud, which is more of a dedicated instance for you specifically, where we host netTerrain and care and feed for it and all that good stuff, and then you guys can host it yourself. We do roll back and have backup points. Typically we do backups like nightly in cloud and other stuff, but we always, I mean, we talk to you about, you know, if you guys have other needs. turn what you want to on and off. Yeah, we do have filtering in layers in the right-hand side of the screen where you can turn things on and off, but our layers are different than if you're an AutoCAD person, it's different, right? AutoCAD has a layer that's basically a whole diagram of stuff. Ours is just turning things on and off that are specific to an object type. Just so you know, so there are differences there, right? We're not an AutoCAD type tool, so. Roadmap for DWG files, ability to apply scaling and dimensions. You can technically do scaling and dimensions now, but the DWG files, I think there's a roadmap thing for it with respect to AutoCAD. Definitely down the road though, so I wouldn't plan on that anytime soon unless there's a requirement you guys have and talk to us about. We're always open. Feature functionality questions. Is there a read-only access feature? We do offer read-only users. So if you host yourself, in fact, you get really unlimited read-only users. So you can have read-only users. We do have a roadmap item where if you're an editor, you can press a button and turn yourself into a read-only user while you're navigating and then turn that back off. That's a roadmap thing. I don't know when that's going to happen. I'm hoping it's going to happen by version 10, honestly, because I want that feature. But I've had other customers ask about that too. So, but Fred's been answering a few questions in there, which is great. If we have a unique identifier at every pull box, will it give you a pathway from point A to point B? We have all the information in Esri. Can it transfer it over? So those are great questions. Well, the pathway would be like what Dwayne showed, which is the CLR. You can also take CLRs and turn them into what we call defined circuit paths as well, where they're named and they have some other features and functionality. As far as Esri, we do have an integration with Esri. It's recently released. If you ever want to try the Esri integration, we can show you kind of how that works and how you can pull data from Esri and what we pull, because Esri, being Esri, they have a lot of different features and functionality. Some things we don't pull, like I think they're shape files we don't bring in, but objects like, you have a manholes and handholds and conduit paths and things like that. Usually we can bring that from Esri now, just so you guys know. Let's see what else. Can the information be put into a data field and reported on concerns for light loss or light power? So if I assume this is referring back to like an OTDR type reading, you can, in the tool, if you're showing like fiber, you can have a field for your fiber strands if you want to record OTDR as a data point. You can also do an attachment where you can right click and do attachments. So if you have a whole OTDR list, you just want to attach it to something, you can do that too. Yep. Conclusion, we have come and create a node for point, so to speak, and within the node we can add nodes, notes and picks. Yes, you can do all those things. Yeah, there's a blog on conduits that Adriana had posted as well. Thank you for the blog stuff. We have a lot of blogs. And if you're not familiar, if you want to post that to netTerrain, networkdocumentation.com. If you go there, there's a lot of resources there as well, including our user guides. We have very good user documentation. We also offer classes, just so everybody knows, and that's not necessarily a pitch for classes, but it's more a pitch that we have good user documentation, because I don't know about you, but when I purchase software anymore, I can almost guarantee that they're not going to have documentation, and they're going to send me to some knowledge-based stuff that I have to kind of search through and bang my head against the wall to find an answer to something. So I'm just saying. Can you export to a spreadsheet? Yeah, most data in netTerrain is accessible. Well, I mean, there's some areas you may not have access to, but as an example, if I wanted to export data out of netTerrain, you can go in and click usually a red button that has a number. It'll give you a big table view of data that you can export to CSV or Excel. We also do have some reporting capabilities and tools as well, what we call the dashboard reporting engine, or the query builder tool, which allows you to build your own reports inside netTerrain, table type reports. So anyway, that said, do you have any templates to download and input data and export back to netTerrain. We do have a CSV import tool, sorry. Import, export, Excel import, where you can do an Excel import of data. And there's a example of that, like a Excel sheet example that you can then sort of bring in. Maps, I'd mentioned maps like the one Dwayne's using is OpenStreetMaps. That's the integration. We also can do Google. These are tile-based maps. So there's a tile server, you connect to the tile server, and then it can serve up the maps. If you're in an environment where you can't get internet access, which means you can't hit a tile server, you can build your own tile server and host it yourself. I have some customers that host their own OpenStreetMap tile servers in-house and use those. And then if you want to occasionally do that, you can. Thank you for the comment there, John, about requesting devices from us and doing a great job. We always like to hear those things. Let's see. My team uses a geo portal currently for baseline of fiber running through our campus and port a file to get into this portal. We do import KMZs. So if you can export to KMZ, we can import it. If it's AutoCAD, there's nothing I can do with AutoCAD today except for background images, honestly. I don't have an integration for AutoCAD. Esri, I can help you out with that now. So, and someone asked about product licensing. We are basically object-based licensing and user-based as well. It's a mix of the two, but we don't care about links. We actually don't license for links or subcomponents like ports and cards. So what I recommend you do is talk to us about pricing. You know, if you're a small environment, it's really not that expensive. Obviously, the bigger, the larger the environment, the more expensive it can get. But you can kind of fine tune what you do as well. Yeah. So as was mentioned, KMZ, but Sean, thank you. You can do a KMZ import. So I'm curious to the ability for us to internal team to generate diagrams in our own instance and netTerrain and export to a customer's instance. You should talk to us more about that as far as exporting data and importing and how you might handle that. There's no direct export import as far as taking data from one project and put it into another because it's all housed in one database. You can't really kind of parse them out. Questions, Visio import, interesting. We allow Visio import, but because Visio is what it is, which is stencils, which is the equivalent of a node for us, when you import from Visio, it may not be exactly what you want or want to use. So now if you're just talking about objects, like you want to take a stencil and convert it and turn it into a node in netTerrain, that you can technically do. You export the stencil as basically a PNG and then use the PNG image. So I hope that makes sense. Yeah, there's a Visio. Looks like there was a blog there that somebody posted. Justice has a great class. That's great to hear. Justice is awesome. Man, no one's saying Jason is awesome. That's kind of sad. Can you monitor link status? So we have a collector tool that can technically do SNMP discovery and monitor an object like a device. So we can check status, right? Is it up? Is it down? But not so much the link itself. I mean, you could get down to the port level for some devices if their SNMP data is good, and you could check that port and see if the status of that is up or down. But if you're looking for status and capacity, bandwidth utilization, that type of stuff, that's not really where we're at today with that tool. So you might have to look elsewhere. Ability to pull Esri. Can you do edits and then update Esri? We're not writing back to Esri yet. That's a great question. It's one way. It's pulling data down at this point. So hopefully one day in the future, we hope to write back to Esri. Esri's a beast, so we're happy we're getting data from Esri at this point. But my guess is that probably, we'll get there. So Cindy, thanks for the comments. Oh, thank you. Jason is awesome. That's great.
You're getting a lot of compliments now, Jason.
I thought Jason is awesome was understood. Sean, you get extra points for that one. So thanks for that. That's awesome. Anyway, Dwayne is really the awesome one today. thank you very much for your time, Dwayne. Really appreciate you
Yes,
coming
thank
and
you so
talking to us
much.
today. We went through the questions. If you need a free trial, you can go to netterrain.us, although you really should reach out to us and talk to us. And I'm not saying that because I want a salesperson to talk to you. It's really about answering your questions effectively, not leaving any questions not answered. We want to make sure that